All right, let me call to order the October special meeting of the Southbury Zoning Commission. Let's all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, seating of alternates. Who's an alternate? Jay? I'll seat you for Dave. No. Are you an alternate? No. Yeah. I'll seat you for Wendy. All right, unfinished business, comprehensive zoning regulation rewrite, discussions with SLR.
Good evening. So everybody in the public may want to know, I'm Vince McDermott, and with me is Taylor Daigle from SLR. And we were with you about 6 weeks ago, I think, beginning of September. Administratively, one change has occurred. Our colleague, Robert Collins, resigned from the company and went elsewhere. So, good for him. Not so good for us. And so the two of us are remaining, and we have one other colleague that we mentioned to you the last time, Julia Fiore, who will also be involved as needed. But I also said the last time that Taylor is the worker bee, and so I'm going to turn this over to her. We distributed to you, I think everyone got it electronically, the initial piece of this, which is really the baseline review, and then we can proceed from there. And Taylor will be leading you, and I will be adding commentary as we go. And please ask questions, and this is a discussion. And we hope that as we proceed in this exercise, that there will be lots of discussion, because we have some opinions. We will respond to questions, but this is for you, so it's got to be right for you. So please feel free to challenge us whenever needed. So.
All right, thanks, Vince. So this is our first step to the process, the baseline review. This was our first big dive into the regulations beyond just getting started. We read all the sections and determined and identified any major issues, and then opportunities for where we could fix those issues, realign things, all the proposed solutions here. So this is a fairly long document. I think the intention tonight is to have conversations about items that we know are just, going to be a continuing discussion within the update, but also just introduce the document and then let you digest it, read it, and provide any additional feedback, over the next week or so. So this is pretty comprehensive. It's not 100% of the way. We always have items that we discover while we're working through the rest of the project that, just contribute to what we've already found here in the baseline review. So this is not the end-all be-all list of things we'll fix, but, a really good guide for us to get started. So the content of the report is organized into 3 sections. We analyze the existing regulations in part 1, then the zoning map in part 2, and then we do a consistency and kind of legal review in part 3. So part 1, we looked at organization, definitions, all the content, districts, uses, development standards, and procedures. I think one of the big highlights from this portion of the review is that reorganization is going to fix a lot of the confusion, redundancies, clean up the language itself. I think we'll find that after we get through that phase of migrating material first, for organizational purposes, things will already start to look clearer, and that's where we then dive into the content updates of fixing definitions and uses, developing more standards, modifying them as needed. I think one of the big sections that we highlighted for concern here, or will have a lot of impact on the way regulations are used, is the procedure section, for opportunity to clarify and realign things with how the town wants everything to be run as far as approvals and procedures go. The second part of the report is the zoning map analysis. This part can be kind of dealt with in a couple different ways. So we did a cursory look through the zoning map to identify geography inconsistencies. You know, are zoning boundaries following center lines? Are for the streets? Are they following geographic patterns? We looked at split lot zones, so every property that is split by a district right now. And a lot of the content here, it could be addressed through working with the NEGO, which is the town's consultant for managing the zoning map. But we can also be addressing some of these through realigning the district boundaries as we have conversations about the intentions of these areas. And, you know, it's a little bit of like a chicken and an egg situation. One, we can fix some of it, but some of it also needs to be done through the mapping itself, and, you know, those will kind of interchange throughout the process here. But this analysis will give you an idea about where things stand and some, you know, food for thought as to how we want to handle the districts themselves in the map. The third part is the consistency, compliance, and other considerations. So this is broken into two parts. The first is the POCD. The second is statutes. The POCD itself, we took a look at all of the recommended action items that are either directly or indirectly related to the zoning regulations. Jordan was helpful in identifying where the priorities lie, so we did rank them all low, medium, and high. I think the intention would be to focus on all of the high priority items first. Some of those are inherently a part of the update itself, while others are things we're going to intentionally be adding in, such as like low impact development techniques, versus I think one of the items is maintaining the Southford District village regulations. That will inherently be carried forward, but we will make improvements as we go. And then the statutory section reviews all relevant zoning regulation changes from state statutes from 2017 till now. Most of them, I would say, have some impact on the update, some less than others. One of the big ones will be 2129, which has a lot about accessory dwelling units that we'll want to make sure that everything's in compliance with, some parking standards, some building standards, things like that. And while we start to migrate all of these materials, those components will start to filter in, and we'll have, you know, dialogue back and forth about how to best handle those. Some of them are, you know, stringent, the zoning must do this. Some of them are a little bit more flexible and allow you to decide how you might want to implement them, such as like the ones with middle housing, and considering those as like permitted uses throughout districts. There's also a handful of attachments in the report. The first one is a preliminary outline of the code that we're suggesting. The attachment kind of explains why we put them where and what would be incorporated into that section. It's our general start to the reorganization, but something to take a look at and let us know if there are any additional changes or shifts. I know one of the items is the definition section could be located at the front or the back of the code. That's a preference on whether we want that to be, you know, in the forefront or something people can jump to the back if they need it. But we've done both, and we're flexible with either one. The second attachment is your larger sheet here, the consolidated use table. This is just a sample from another town we've worked on, but I do think it's a good visual for everyone to have. You currently have a consolidated use table, but we're going to work on making it cleaner and easier to read. Some of the highlights from this, I would say, is we'd like to reduce all uses down to one word or phrase that encapsulates the intention of it. It cleans up the table. We also like to make sure that the abbreviations we're using for permitting types is really easy to distinguish. Currently, yours has, like, I think E, ES, S. They're logical, but it's also a little bit less intuitive to somebody who's not usually looking at these regulations, so we'll make suggestions for how to make that easier to read. We also like to incorporate a section that can draw your attention directly to where the rest of the regulations for that use would be, so it's a very quick, easy option to find the additional standards. Your attachment C is a zoning map, or a map of the town, which identifies all of the parcels that are currently split by the zoning boundaries. I think there's two things to highlight here. In the eastern portion of the community, there's a, you know, a collection of some boundaries that are, or properties that are split by boundaries in the Southford Village area. The way the regulations are currently written, it's, there's overlapping there, and so that's an area where we might want to consider making sure those boundaries are correctly realigned. The other item to kind of consider here is, I believe the majority of these split lots are involving the R60 district, so that might be an item that we can easily readjust the boundary lines to address these split lots here. And the final attachment is a list that was provided to us by Jordan at the start of the project, an ongoing list of town items that we know we're looking to have addressed in this update. So what we did was just cataloged all of these and indicated where in the regulations we expect these to be addressed in. This is something that we keep up to date throughout the whole process. We will continue to add to it and detract from it as we make our way through. And it's a good guidance just to make sure that we're hitting all the marks that the town is looking to fix off the bat here. So that's a lot of information. I think if there's any components that we'd like to discuss in more detail, if you have any questions about our thoughts on specific sections, we can also take that route here.
Thank you. Thanks, Taylor. Taylor, is that right?
Yes.
Daigle?
Yes.
Is that D-A-I-G-L-E?
Yes.
So I have a question. When you're visualizing or considering the change to the language in general, are you talking about aiming the language at someone who's a non-professional, ordinary reader? Or are you thinking, okay, this has to be readable by, development professionals? And where are you slicing that?
I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Kind of depends on the topic of the code. We like to make it as user-friendly and understandable to anyone who picks up this document. They could reasonably find what they need and understand the content. I think the way the code's currently written, a lot of that would, modernizing the language would be relatively effective in making them user-friendly to begin with.
We have to strike a balance, because there are some things that are desirable, your desires, but then there are some that have to be extremely precise.
Exactly.
The language in many sections, there was a writing style that was somewhat legalistic, and a lot of herein's and whereases and duplication without any real reason for that duplication. And so we want to trim that stuff down so that a reader gets it once, a good example, if my recollection is right, in many of the sections there were sort of standards and then substandards, and they were repetitive. And so we're going to try not to be repetitive. You don't need to do that. We need it to say it once, and it can follow through. And we found a lot of that stuff. Other terminology that was strange, and this is a Bob Bryanism, and not a criticism, but he referred to paragraphs, P-A-R-A or P-A-R. That's no longer in use in this business. They are sections, and subsections and sub-subsections, so the structure would be different going forward. It will be decimals all the way through. Just easier to today's conventions. Other things that we noticed that will get addressed, and I think in this text that we've given you, there are things like, you use the term special exception. Special exception and special permits are equal under current statutes. They're interchangeable. But the implication to the public is, hey, I gotta get an exception. That's not what they're getting. You're giving greater credence or greater scrutiny through a special permit process. There's no exception. And I think that's the sort of thing that we want to change, or suggest that be changed. Another area that we have to work through, and we're gonna have to work it through with you, and I know that I saw this thing on the PDU and the PDDs and the processes there. We need to think that through to make it clearer. I don't know about being more simple, but who is doing what for whom needs to be clarified. Because I work with these regulations, I'm always confused about whose role is, who's doing what. The other interesting thing that we found, and I hope I'm not deviating from your presentation
No,
here.
go for it.
For whatever reason, the Zoning Board of Appeals has greater authority, I guess, in quotes, than I've seen in other regulations. The statutory function of the Zoning Board of Appeals is to challenge the zoning enforcement officer in appeal and variances, and to a lesser extent today than it was a year or so ago, motor vehicles, which was in a separate section of the statutes. And we would suggest that you consider giving the Zoning Board of Appeals what they should be doing and taking back into your jurisdiction. Because you are the zoning, these are your regulations, you're the enforcer of these regulations in a positive way. And we believe that you might want to consider that restructuring. I don't know how you feel about that, and I don't even know the history as to why that happened, but it has happened. So, to your question, we're going to try to simplify it so that you and your successors understand the regulations, and the professional who comes before you understands them clearly, and the lay applicant, the general public who comes before you, mostly before the zoning enforcement officer, understands exactly what they have to do, and whose jurisdiction is where, and what the flow of paper is, and. And Jordan pointed out a few things on aquifer protection, for example. There are state statutes as to what they have to encompass. There are jurisdictional issues as to what aquifers are what. And you've distinguished some, we want to think about that. And was that adopted properly? And does the town need to go back and do it again? That also brings up another question that, for consideration, is that there are references to ordinances in your regulation in accordance with the sedimentation and erosion control ordinance. It's in your regulations, it's yours, and as long as you are following the state guidelines for E&S and exercise that authority, that's where it belongs. And so the reference to the ordinance is interesting. I don't even know if it's still in your code of ordinances, because we haven't gone back that far. But that's the sort of thing that we have to clear up and are clearing up in this whole process. I don't know if you want to, do we want to work our way through this a little bit more?
Sure.
I don't know, Mark, did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you so much. That was my question.
Okay, so, yeah, everybody should be able to pick it up and work their way through it. Okay, how tall can my house be, and where is it measured from?
Well, we
You know.
can't make it so simple that the answer's maximum height 40 feet. Right now, the standard is average grade, you have to measure from multiple different points. That still has to be consistent, because we still
Yeah.
have to have the requirements and the standards so that we can do the right job.
Yeah.
But en masse, we need to make the language legible, and
And,
that's really
and,
the point.
you know, the measurement of a building height is in the building code.
Correct?
And so why make it any difference? Building code is the building code, unless there is some particular reason that you want to do it differently. That's one, I think that's a great example. Another one is E&S. Another one, I'm trying to think, some of the stormwater management issues. Those are codified by DEP. And so you need to meet those standards. So why regurgitate that in your own text when it is in, somebody's telling you that you still have the jurisdiction to evaluate that on a site plan, but you don't need to repeat that language in its entirety in your regulations.
And that way, when DEP comes out with new standards for erosion controls, we don't then need to modify the ordinance.
Right.
to match
Absolutely
those.
right.
It's
Absolutely
gonna
right.
live with the standards
Yeah.
of.
And so in the enabling section of your regulations, that's what we'll see. We'll set that up in such a way that says that here are these references, and when those references change by virtue of stuff beyond your control, it gets done automatically. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, all good. I think, let's see, we kind of talked a little bit about procedures. We did discuss the use table. We will, I think one big component is, right now, use standards are spread throughout a number of the sections of the code. We do like to consolidate that all down to one. Even if there are different, permitting procedures for those things, we'll make that clear. But the restructure of the code will make it very easy to find the exact section that we need to understand everything they need to know about ADUs. With the exception of most uses, their definitions will still remain in the definitions section or chapter. Aside from, I think, a handful of scenarios that we typically keep it grouped within the regulations themselves would be something like floodplains. You have some aquifer definitions that may end up staying there, whereas your parking regulations define a few items over there that really could just be consolidated with the other definitions, just for, ease of finding the material throughout the code. I think another item that we are looking at addressing is the location or the use of the administrative policies that are within the code. Each of them have a different recommendation. So if we're looking on page 8 of the packet here, the first policy is about maps and plan certification. I think that's a good standard to continue incorporating, but it would be we are suggesting that be a part of the procedures and the requirements for all applications, as it's like a baseline for the mapping and certification that is required. I think I'll jump to policy 3, the historic structures and sites. Our recommendation at the moment is to include that as a site development standard. It's a bit unique in the way that it's incorporated. It could, oftentimes you might see something like that in its separate ordinance for the town. But I do think given the use of it, it could remain in the zoning through that section. Policy 2 is a little interesting, the plans of development and the references to the plan of conservation and development and all of its iterations over the years. I think much of that will be incorporated and cleaned up through the modifications to the existing procedures, especially related to plan developments and site development plans themselves.
An issue that I want to raise with you is the administrative procedures in general. Some of them are regulations. And right now, administrative procedures, you can change at will as a commission. I'm not so sure that's right. If there is a change of a standard, regardless of what that standard is, under your control, that change, I believe, needs to be adopted as an amendment to a regulation and not as a policy change. And so we're going to encourage you to try to stay away from those policies. The question of fees, for example, That's set by the Board of Selectmen, I believe, on an annual basis. That sort of stuff, we just reference it. So that, if you wanted to put a listing of those fees, or if you wanted to put in the administrative procedures, contents of a form, something like that, which can change. But anything that is substantive, I believe, belongs in the regulations, and to change it requires a change of regulation. It's sort of extrajudicial, I don't like to use that term too much, in today's context. But we want you to be careful about that.
I think it'd be interesting to hear if anyone has any thoughts on the POCD incorporation and the recommendations for those. I think some of these end up being more substantive and impact the development of the code more than others. So understanding any perspectives you might have on items within the POCD that should be added or prioritized would be helpful. I think one of the ones I noticed and thought about was the connection to the tie between the technical standards outlined in the POCD and the zoning. I think one of our recommendations is to fully incorporate those standards into the zoning themselves so that they're all housed in one location. I think that makes it easier for a developer or anyone reading the code to find the regulations that they want to use. This is for the cluster and the multifamily group, or multifamily dwelling groups. It also eliminates one of those scenarios where that technical standard needs to be carried forward in every POCD until it's adopted through the regulation itself. I think that's one that might look a little bit different. It might look very new in the code itself, but will streamline your processes.
Let me ask a question. Are you saying that what you're looking for is consistency?
Consistency between the two, I do believe, I guess I haven't compared side to side, the content in the regulations versus the content in the POCD, but we know that the POCD is what your regulations are referencing to, so we want to make those consistent, but also eliminate the need to go find another document to read these
Okay.
regulations themselves.
So it's clear.
Yes.
Got it.
One of the things that we're going to plant the seed for, and I know you've had this discussion among yourselves, and we don't need an answer tonight yet. But the PDD process and the PDD standards and jurisdiction and why, I think we need to think about clearly on how that functions. For example, the cluster, a cluster subdivision, by virtue of definition, a subdivision is solely within the jurisdiction of the planning commission. However, you have the right and the obligation to set what those standards are. All right? And even in the PDU process, I think that, please correct me if I'm wrong, but in the PDU, those cluster subdivisions fall into that category, is that right?
PDD would be cluster subdivision.
PDD? I think see, I'm confused. So I think we need to be very clear as to what the function of the planning commission is, and not yours. When you have a separate commission, as you do, subdivisions are their bailiwick for approval all the way down the line. However, the standards for that approval are yours. Okay? So why is it fall into why is it a PDD then? What's so special about a cluster that you need to have that other layer? You might want it, and we're not going to dissuade you, but I'm raising the question is, why are you having a different standard? If you want a cluster, set the standards. And now, if that is a cluster with subdivision lines, okay? if you have a cluster subdivision in a common interest community, whose jurisdiction is that? Is that yours or theirs? Do you see the difference? So if I bunched a bunch of houses together in a thing, and I had a density of X, and it's permitted by the regulation, if I put lot lines between them, that's a subdivision. That is not the zoning commission's authority. The standards for how those lines, or the spacing, that's your jurisdiction, you set them up in advance. The other is more flexible, and whose responsibility, where should that remain? So just give it some thought, and how you would like going forward for that operation to occur. Similarly, why is there a distinction in acreage for a PDU versus a PDD? Aren't they the same? I don't know. I'm asking you to think about, why is there a difference? Should there be a difference? A name is a name. Now, what other communities do in this whole genre of PDD, some people call them special development districts, where geographically they're defined as to where they can occur, which is what you have. And the methodology is a change of zone accompanied by a development plan. And that becomes the regulation for that site. That's common practice. So what is the role of, what do you want the role to be and continue to be on the authority of approval of those sorts of things? It's a zone change. Zone changes are your jurisdiction. You may look for assistance from someone else, from another agency. That's fine. But let's think that through as to what you want to do in controlling that part of the process. I see Gary is shaking your head, so these are things that you've been thinking about.
For a long time.
Yeah, right. And just reading from the media, is that what you, Sullivan, has been asking you to do in this latest thing? Is that what that's about?
Well, we're looking to downsize the, we like to see a PDD, but we can't go by regulation to a PDD. All we have available is a PDU, so we're trying to make some changes to the language so we can do what we want to do and turn that into a PDD type of development where we have control. We like what he's presenting, so we want to be able to keep going with that, so.
The PDDs in general, not specifically to you, have a role in land use control. It gives the flexibility, or it should give the flexibility for good things and odd things.
Yeah.
Something that you really want to have because it's good, but doesn't fit the mold. And you want to have that. That's what the PDD should be, and that's what it has been. But I think we need to consider how to refine that to make it very clear as to who's responsible for what. Yeah, right?
No, it's important,
Yeah.
sure.
Sorry.
No, that's it. Any other, like, thoughts or questions on any of, the items we've discussed tonight or haven't gotten to?
And remember, to Taylor's point, we really want you to have this conversation. Anything that you want to bring up right now is important, but really chewing on this in the next coming weeks and providing whatever feedback you really have as far as this goes, so that we can really step into those next stages as this project progresses.
So I think, I think we were considering doing, giving you guys some more, like, time to review this information, alongside your regulations themselves. We could set, a deadline of comments to be received back to us so that we can make further adjustments and things like that. I don't know, we could do maybe the 7th or that would be about a week or so. Or we could do 2 weeks, whatever the commission might be comfortable with as far as what timing you need for this.
Taylor, how quick would you want the turnaround to be from receiving the comments to when we're trying to schedule that next special meeting? To sit down again and have more of the conversation.
So I think well, I guess we can kind of jump a little bit to the schedule, because that's kind of a good segue for that. I think the intention is that our next meeting would be in December. I don't know that we need a special meeting for it. We would go through the next step of this reorganization, which is the annotated outline. That document's going to show you where everything is starting to fall in the new organization. It's a little bit of a complicated document, but it is the map to the new regulations. And that provides you with the consistency of, or the transparency of understanding exactly where everything's going, and the knowledge that, we've tracked all of that. That being said, I believe your December meeting is on the 10th. We can finalize this report with your comments before that meeting. I would say 3 weeks,
Okay.
3
Well,
weeks
yeah,
prior, so.
I mean, yeah, given that we have so much time before
Yeah.
that next meeting, I don't think that really plays into it. 1 or 2 weeks, does this commission feel they would need to chew on this, have the time to look over the POCD, have the time to look over the zoning regulations, and really put their intention into making comments on what's being proposed to change, what's being proposed to be altered slightly. A lot of the comments are just reorganization, and that's just part of this process, but where do you want to see regulations go? What are the pain points? What are the items on the POCD that you feel are critical? How much time would it be necessary or best? 2 weeks, Jay?
So comments back by November 14th. I suppose that would be about the timeframe, correct?
Is everyone okay with that? November 14th.
That is around the time of your November meeting, correct?
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, so that would give you the opportunity.
Okay, so we're a week later for the regular meeting, but
Okay.
that's totally fine.
And also, we would like, and feel free tonight to identify other burning issues that you would like us to begin to think about that, hot button issues. What are we missing? Or are we beginning to capture your concerns and frustrations? But, we need to know what they are so we can at least begin to think about them.
So commissioners are aware where the conversation's gone. We've touched on simplifying language. Obviously, section 11 and lighting is something that needs to be
All right, so let's talk about lighting.
simplified. Soil extraction is another
Yep.
big section that is convoluted and all over the place. That's another one that needs to be addressed thoroughly. Modifying the use table to remove a lot of the arduous special permit processes that pretty much are ubiquitous throughout the entire document. These are the things that we've really touched on kind of back of house wise, but anything that the commissioners feel.
Lighting. It's the most elaborate lighting regulation that Don Antil ever figured out. I know.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it was. And you're absolutely correct.
The what?
Yes, he does.
He does.
He does.
I know.
It's useful.
We had, this is just an approach. We were involved representing a developer client recently, and were challenged by the municipality. It was a special permit process, and it was a non-residential use permitted in a residential zone. It was actually redevelopment. And lighting was an issue. And what we wound up doing, and the commission did approve it last week, thank goodness, we tied it back to the standards in dark skies, and which are fairly simple. There's a model ordinance that they put out that would fit pretty well. And the stuff in yours is contained in that model ordinance. Does it matter to you and to anybody else other than the authors of that regulation, as to, some of the technical stuff that nobody understands. Nobody
I don't
understands.
know what a nit is.
A what?
I don't know what a nit is.
Yeah, I know. Do we want to put the definition of a nit?
I think we might have to.
Yeah, I know, but that's the point, that we don't, that, you've got 10 pages or whatever of lighting, and you should have good regulations on lighting, because that affects the character of your town. So, how do you want us to look at that ordinance and try to incorporate that? You've looked at it, and it's a comprehensive, understandable, and it covers the same stuff, but in layman's term.
Yeah, we've incorporated that exact ordinance into a couple other zoning rewrites, for some towns that have already had lighting standards and some that just did not have any at all. I would say it touches on every topic that is in your current lighting standards, but to reiterate what we've all been going over, it references the technical components of it to the actual location, the IT, or the technical standards involved with that, rather than regurgitating it and overwhelming the reader quite a bit.
It's a fabulous regulation, but it's over the top.
Yeah, you're right. It is way over the top.
Would you be able to send us an example of what you're talking about?
Sure. As we go through this, we'll be giving you all of that stuff, so you can begin to see it, to make sure that it does what you have experienced and what the issues that come up at your public hearings on site plans, from the neighbors in particular. How do you control it? Can you achieve 0-foot candles at the property line? If you have a half a foot, think about this. If we go outside tonight and you drop your keys in the grass, can you find them? If you can't, that's okay. That's about a half a foot candle.
Yeah.
So some of these other below a half a foot candle or whatever, is that a problem?
0.05,
What?
that's ours.
You got a 0.05. I don't know how you measure that.
You drop your keys and see if you can find them.
Right. Yeah. But in contrast, I noticed, and for your athletic facilities, at certain athletic fields, you don't have you have some standards, but in my judgment, as a designer of these fields, I'd love to build a field in your town. I wouldn't have any regulations. I could do whatever the hell I wanted. I'm not suggesting that. And so we need to balance that. We don't want to take away athletic lighting at Community Park. But what is reasonable, and what are the cutoffs? Where are the cutoffs, and what should they be within a certain distance of the playing surface? I do like, by the way, your time. The lights have to be off at a certain time, and I like that. That's good. So, what about signage? Another one.
I think we may need to have a workshop with some business owners when it comes time to have a discussion on signage, just so we're projecting an air of, cooperation with the business community that's expressed such a dissatisfaction for the current regulations, involve them and make sure that they either understand why things are the way they are, or we modify them to accommodate certain aspects. A lot of it's been included in what I
Yep.
wrote down, but that's not to say that when we break into section 10, that we're not gonna, hit up against some walls, realize that things are operating the right way, or that it needs to be changed. There's a couple things that I'll be sending in just an update, just so the staff file can keep going. One thing that this commission will benefit from, I feel, and the land use office will benefit from as well, is clear enforcement standards for the ZEO. If a violation occurs, what's the process for sending notices? When does that individual end up before the commission? What does the commission determine based on the facts that have been presented to them? And then what are the follow-up aspects of issuing notices of violation, providing timelines. If those timelines, it's determined compliance is being worked towards, what extensions can be provided at that point, or cease and desist orders, stop work orders. The commission and the zoning enforcement officer need to be tied together as far as enforcement goes, and right now, it's ambiguous, and it's whatever's happening upstairs must be okay because we're reporting to you constantly. Without it being rock solid and without the guardrails being clearly there, it's hard to pin down enforcement, and it becomes this amorphous object that you're trying to wrangle, and you're struggling with the tools that you have to get that done. Because apart from just issuing citations and hitting them with the hardest enforcement we have, it's really hard to impart the necessity of compliance to these business owners, residents, whomever it may be.
You brought up a very interesting point, and I'm glad you did, one of being consistent, because the statutes say you can enforce, but it does, and there are certain end games if somebody's really a recalcitrant. That's different from what you're talking about. One of the issues, and I don't know if you've run across it as a commission, is when a simple zoning permit is issued by the zoning enforcement officer, how does the public know when that permit has been issued? Because from a notice point of view, because somebody can take an appeal of that permit. This is not a court action. That's a zoning board of appeals action. And I've run into this fairly recently. When was the notice? How did I know that he issued a permit? So I think goes along the same line as to how does the public know that when you've issued a permit, that if I'm a neighbor that doesn't like that permit, how do I know that he even issued a permit? And so do I miss my 20-day period in which I can file a notice with the zoning board of appeals?
Taylor, we've been referencing Woodbury's, which seem to be really particular and specific.
Pardon?
I had not seen it lately, but do they not used to issue notices of permits in the newspaper?
Your decisions have to be noticed in the newspaper.
But a shed permit doesn't.
Just a permit. Someone pulls a permit to build something. I used to, I'm talking years ago, we used to see a listing in the newspaper. Permit has been issued to such and such to build a pool or to add an addition or whatever.
Yeah, I've not seen that in other communities of late. You're right, that used to be the standard. So that,
So Vince, are you suggesting we go back to that? I'm missing.
no, maybe on not on a basis, but maybe just a filing filing, yeah, town clerk.
Yeah.
There's a notice in the town clerk of the permits that have been issued in the week of. And so then that starts, anybody can go and take a
And
look at it.
take a look
any
at it,
time.
yeah.
And keep it forward facing.
Yeah.
But it would seem to me that it would be useful if that was also a notice that went into the paper, for example, on a monthly basis, and our community knew that once a month, there will be a listing of permits or whatever, because
Okay.
otherwise, where do you even know to go to look, and what are you looking for?
Yeah.
I
It
think,
would be better on the website for the town, because
All right.
papers are kind of going. left,
you-
right.
I think
Okay,
that's,
you just brought up the point, the
Yeah.
point that is a debate.
Also, it would be a lot less expensive to put it on the town website.
Sure, we already pay for that
Yeah.
service.
Yeah, and that is a debate that's going on
Oh, jeez.
in the General Assembly.
Yeah.
And the professional planners of this world, I'm not among that group, by the way, want to eliminate the need to post in the newspaper. And there is a court case on that subject down in the borough of Fenwick, which, do you know where Borough of Fenwick is?
Old
Part of Old Saybrook. It's where Catherine Hepburn lived. And there was a legal case about what is the newspaper down there. And I think for the purpose we're talking about, notice on the website is sufficient.
I think so too.
Yeah. And another administrative issue, and I don't know where you are on it, and we can talk about it, is, do you have, there's a state statute that requires that anybody who gives you a notice that they want to be informed of your actions and meetings can be apprised of that in writing. Have you seen that? All right. There's a court case pending up in Salisbury right now about that, and what constitutes proper notice. And it's a registry. And if I am a resident of Southbury and want to know what is upcoming on your agenda, how do I get that notice? It can be done electronically. And so we might want to think about that in these administrative parts of the regulation to make to be transparent.
But then we also need to notify the public that that's how it's going to be
Yeah, yeah,
presented.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's where things can fall down.
right.
How do you tell the public to go to the website for these things?
Well, you have, the town has a website, land use office has a component of that, right? And in that body of language that is now on your website, it tells people who to contact and how to get things done, and you just put it in there. And so, in this day and age, people can go and find that out.
Okay.
Or you have a flyer that's posted with the town clerk's office where everybody starts, and, there are lots of different ways. But your suggestion, Susan, about putting it in the newspaper is very expensive, sorry, for anybody who's from Voices here. So,
Or even in, our first selectman does a very comprehensive, updated newsletter kind of thing. Even a statement in there that this is going to be the procedure.
Yeah.
Heads up, because you get it in a format that you can read.
it's an idea for letting the community know what you're doing.
Exactly.
And it then will trigger an appeal to the zoning board of appeals if they don't like what was done.
Sure, yeah, that's the process.
Can I ask one other question? I just want to be sure I understand. And Jordan, maybe this is going to be a question for you. What is it that you would like us as a commission to have reviewed and looked at and made comments on before that, what you sort of have here is a drop dead date in November? The 14th of November. What do you want us to be doing?
So they hit on a number of items as far as this goes, even when we look at the preliminary outline, right? Are there any comments you want to make as far as how things are shaking out and how things are getting lumped together?
Okay.
When we start to look at the zone map, do we feel there's a need to tackle the split parcels? Or do you feel that frankly, status quo is just fine? We hit on definitions. Are there any definitions that are deficient? Are there any aspects that need to be embellished on? Site development standards, a little bit more heady. I think we'll dive into that in a lot more detail, but by all means, if you're going through those areas and you're reading those regulations and you're hitting up against things that, if you felt you were trying to do a building project or open up a business and you're just lost in the weeds on the language, we'll need to address that. We'll need to make sure it's user-friendly, but also explains the specifics of that application. But Taylor, if you...
The report itself discusses a lot about the organization and how we'll modify, simplify, all that kind of stuff. I would look at this, in addition to everything Jordan just said, as an opportunity to pull up any red flags that you have about your regulations that we have not specifically discussed. I've got a list of the items that we've been talking about this evening, but I'm sure after you scroll through your regulations again in this report, your thoughts on other items might come up. The earlier we know about those types of things, the better, and the easier it is for us to incorporate. For instance, low-impact development strategies was a high priority from the POCD. In the next phase, where we go through the annotated outline, we want to make sure we're already including where that's going to be added into the regulations. If we don't know about it at that stage, it makes it a little bit harder to go back. It's not impossible to do that, but it just helps us map out the whole process and make sure we're covering everything that we need to. You know, pieces get picked up all along the way, but, you know, right now is a great time to pull out any of those red flags of items that you know need to be added, modified, you know, consolidated, yeah.
Can I therefore request, probably again from you, Jordan, could you just send us as the commissioners sort of an outline of what has just been reiterated here, so that as we go through, because I mean, you're asking us to look at an awful lot of information, and for what, for me, is a relatively short amount of time. And I would like you to at least highlight, if nothing else, at least look at these things. These are the most critical things to start with.
Not a problem.
That would be, at least, I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but for me, that would be helpful, because I'm thinking, holy smokes.
Well, one I suggest that you look at the piece on planning, the items in the POCD.
Okay.
Giving you a list there. Are these your do you want these, do you want to take them, that recommendation from the planning commission in the POCD, and do you want us to make sure we incorporate it, or no, that's not important to you?
Okay,
So go through that and tell us what you feel. We don't expect you to say, here's how we want you to do it, that's why you hired us. But we've had this discussion about lighting, so we hear what you're saying, we're gonna try to clean that up. If there are other things that you've encountered of late, or consistently encounter in your conduct of your business that you think ought to be looked at, raise that flag, and we'll take a look at it.
So I, like, one thing that well, first of all, this seems very comprehensive, and I thank you for like going through it and identifying opportunities. One thing that kind of keeps coming back to me as we're talking about is best practices, right? So if you can give us any examples of towns that you think are best in breed or best in practice in terms of like how they have their zoning regulations structured.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing.
All
Do you have a recent rewrite you did for some
One
municipality?
that got
you-
adopted last night,
That
right?
you're proud of and you really like?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There were two. And Taylor should take credit for them.
Nice.
Avon got
Right.
adopted this week.
Last week, I think.
Last week.
Officially posted, but.
Took them a long time after where our work was finished, but it's done. And
Stratford as
Stratford,
well. I would say that Stratford's is a little bit more similar to the scenarios we're facing with your regulations,
except worse.
except really complicated. They hadn't touched their regulations since the 50s. That was a major, major overhaul. But I do think that would give you a good idea about what these would
Okay.
begin to look like.
I mean, you see our regulations and how chaotic they are, and we want to get to a point where we want a regulation that you know will work. And if Stratford is probably one of the top issues that you worked on.
Stratford's a good example, and Avon's another good example.
Okay,
do you know if theirs are online?
they should be
Yeah.
online,
They
yeah.
both are
Okay.
available, yes.
What's interesting, is Stratford is urbanized, more urbanized than you, but still has some hot-button issues. Avon is less urbanized than you, but has many of the same characteristics of some concentrated development and some very rural lands. So not unlike yours.
And I think just, you know, another component to think of when you're reviewing those, as you're thinking about your own regulations, part of the next step is, along with the annotated outline, I usually like to provide a sample of a style sheet. So, you know, what a standard page would look like, how our headings are gonna work, what the body of the text might work, things like that. So, the formatting you see in Stratford or Avon, while the organization of it will, you know, we're proposing to be very similar, the style of it is completely flexible. We've seen people use sections, we've seen articles, we've seen starting in the thousands and moving down. It's really just a matter of practice of how you'd like to refer to them. I usually propose staying within the same, phrase that you currently use, which is sections, but complete flexibility on the style of that.
Is the end deliverable still going to be the same online availability for that code?
Unicode?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to, it will be able to be imported into Municode.
But the flexibility here is you will also have a user-friendly document in Word and PDF that will function in the same way, which I don't believe you currently have. Like a simple one, you have to export it from Municode, which is messy.
It's clunky.
So you will have the opportunity to reference the PDF itself instead of just Municode as well. Numbering and system should all match. They can handle the migration of that, but it will be a nice addition to have that document available for you.
So it becomes Southbury instead of Municode.
And then the integration with that of what you were mentioning of like the diagrams and some different flow charts and how that would work. Would that be in addition to the text or sort of
So
supplemental?
diagrams, if we're going to give you a diagram of building height, how do you measure building height? No, that will be embedded in the regulation. That's not, you'll see that.
Like as its own separate chapter of refer to these or?
No, well,
I like to usually bake them directly into it. How the online format manages that varies a little bit on just the appearance of it. But we will be using plenty of tables. They will be easily distinguishable from the rest of the text. We will incorporate graphics directly into it. So when you're reading the regulation about what the size of a parking space should be, there will be a graphic that is very clearly, this is measurement A, B, and C. It'll help you all just digest the material faster and easier, but also just explain these concepts to the public or people who have never encountered them before in the first place.
the other caution that we see in your current regulation is the term waiver. You will not see that in the new regulation. There is no such thing as a waiver in zoning. You can change the language to give yourself flexibility, but there is no waiver. That's illegal. All right, so we're going to set up things to avoid those on what basis did you waive the regulation? Planning Commission can waive certain things, that's in the statutes. In the zoning, there is no such thing as a waiver. You go get a variance. But, so if you're going to, if you want some flexibility to change, let me give you an example. Parking, there will be a standard, there will be a formula for the number of spaces required. But if you wanted the flexibility by virtue of whatever, we will say that, the commission may consider in the special permit process modification of the zoning standard, number of spaces, based on a technical standard, Institute of Traffic Engineers Parking Generation Book. All right, that's the sort of thing. So you're not giving a waiver, you're giving yourself an opportunity to consider an alternative. You're not waiving anything, you're just giving it, so we're gonna be very precise. You asked about when we need to be precise, we're gonna be precise on that. But to give you the flexibility. So zoning regulations that are so ironclad don't work. Zoning regulations that are too loose don't work, and so we have to strike the balance of what is the base and where can you be flexible without going nuts about being flexible. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely does.
Any other, last conversations for the evening?
Let's go one, the meeting after that. At what point and how do you want to engage the public? And at what point and how you want to engage the planning commission? Let's go to the public one first. You want to explain how we've done it in the past?
Yeah, so we're tentatively, right now, we have a engagement opportunity scheduled for January. In general, we present what the project is going, like, what's going on, why are we doing this, what's the benefit to the town? And we'll solicit feedback from the public about topics that we know we want to discuss. That could be permitted uses, things people would like to be able to see. If we feel that the crowd has like interest in like more technical components, it could be something like dimensional standards. But the common thing with the zoning regulations themselves is just an educational component for the public. These are not something most people are looking at every day, so making them understand why we're doing this and the significance of it is really a major focus for that. Another type of public engagement we're proposing for the project is targeted sessions with end users of the regulations, your developers, your business community.
And the lawyers.
And lawyers, yes. Which is flexible. I mean, that could be something that we focus on first and get their, thoughts and considerations before we begin really diving into public opinion, just so we know, if signage is a major issue for the business community, we need to talk to them about how we're gonna fix that or what we're proposing. That's the tentative plan at the moment is, at least a session in January, whether that be the public engagement session or the targeted session. I think that's, something just to think about how you'd like to approach that. But that would be, something we're planning over the next few months here.
So I started to get to work on the targeted list, just so everyone knows, but please.
No, it's good, just looking at those, so your public open house would be initially starting to just go through the project itself, it looks like, just based on this. And then the last one is, would you present then like a drafted, overview to the public?
By the time we get to a draft of a complete regulation, maybe too late, we want to
Okay.
get some the people who are in front of you all the time have opinions, and I know you've been challenged, as every other commissioner has been challenged by, this is too hard, or this is too loose, or whatever. We need to hear from them, and for you to tell us after that what you want to do about it, or what you would like us to try to attempt. That to me is gonna be really important. I wasn't aware of the business and the signage thing, but I think that's a great point. That could be all done at the same meeting, because of the same people.
Definitely.
It's the same people. And there are a group of developers who frequent you, there are a group of lawyers who come before you, and there are the business community that are always a challenge, and you want to accommodate them from an economic development point of view. You certainly don't want, but you don't want them taking over the world either, necessarily. So.
As far as the organization of starting with the general public, I think there's a benefit there because we get to just get the word out en masse as to what the zoning commission's doing, what the intent is, and what these regulations are, and what the consequences and benefits of altering them are gonna be. Sets the stage for the public. Anyone who so chooses thereafter can actually be monitoring the situation, involved. We're also gonna have public hearings as part of the adoption
by law,
process.
right.
So involving the public at a front-end point gets them on notice, gets them to follow the project as it proceeds, and they'll be publicized that we'll be providing public hearings and another opportunity for them to comment on the actual substantive document. Organizing the community leaders at the latter half of the project gets us the opportunity to crack into the regulations, see what the direction is going to be, and then start to involve the people that will actually be utilizing the regulations and applying them to their projects and with their clients as well. That's my own personal take on the organization of the public participation, but
That's good.
Will this also encompass what each zone is permitted to do, or is this something or that's something totally different?
use table is gonna be an aspect of that. but I don't anticipate altering so much of what's already permitted and unpermitted. That standard's pretty much been set. It's just gonna be how those applications are administered, whether they be through a special permit or whether they are, we've hit a development stage that we can simplify some office space and some interior fit outs that we kind of butt up against, because pretty much everything we do at this point, if someone wants to operate a business, it's 2 months in a public hearing. And that's too arduous right now for us to be productive as a town, provide a desirable place to develop economic benefits. We have to be more accommodating, but still hold on to the standards that are restrictive for a reason. So I don't think a lot's gonna change as far as that goes.
I think that's the right approach. Absolutely. It's, right now, it's an all or nothing. It's either a simple permit or a McGilla. And, or is there something in between? Some communities have delegate to the zoning enforcement officer, properly so, certain things. They reserve to themselves something that you want to see, or not. And if it is, you can still proceed and you discuss it as a commission and and proceed from there. It doesn't have to be a special permit. The special permits should be special. If you're basing a decision on a special permit, there is not flexibility. You meet the permit, you meet the standards, you get your permit. The special permit gives you some flexibility to tie it back to other principles. If it's a historic property, and we can go through those as to what those are. You have those in your regulations now. Condition, I forget the term that was used, I have to look it up, but it is
General and detailed?
Pardon?
General and detailed?
Yeah. General, and the additional standards, there we go. We have standards, we have additional standards, and then we have additional standards. That's nuts. That's nuts. So, happy to answer other questions you might have, or get some guidance from you.
Get stuff to you prior to the next meeting that you show up at, and let's get this moving. We need it done.
We'll keep you moving on it, that's for sure.
Keep it moving, yeah.
And we will see you next in December with the next phase. That's, consolidated our, topics from tonight, presents you a new outline, and we will begin planning the engagement activities for our first open house.
And Taylor will be she will be the participant at the December meeting.
Yes.
You heading down south then? Nice.
Tomorrow.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. Glad we got you today then.
Well, I'm here for critical meetings, and I will be here.
We appreciate it.
Pardon?
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good job.
All right, thanks. All right, one last topic is application number 25-281Z, PDU number 333 Main Street South is being withdrawn at this point, and I assume resubmitted at a later date?
More than likely, depending on how the text change shakes out.
Okay. Now, it's a good move.
Yeah, procedurally, it wouldn't work. We'd be referring things back and forth to planning, and when the new standard, if the new standard hits, it's a completely different process, and we would have had to start over anyway.
Yeah.
So,
All right. And the, Hugh understood all that. Well, he obviously
he submitted.
withdrew it, so,
So,
okay. All right. Any other discussion on that?
there should, on that, thank you, sorry.
All right. Then the last item of business, affordable housing discussion.
So, Affordable Housing Subcommittee has been spinning their tires a little bit, and they have gotten to a point where they really would like to understand the direction of the commissions and boards that will have a direct effect on affordable housing in Southbury. What they would like to propose at this junction, as a result of not really understanding where everyone's heads are at with regard to affordable housing or their knowledge of affordable housing, would be to have a sit-down discussion with members of the Zoning Commission, Planning Commission, Affordable Housing Subcommittee, and Board of Selectmen. So they have really put out a desire to host such a meeting. Affordable Housing Subcommittee is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, so they have been put on notice. I would like this commission to understand that that would be a very beneficial meeting that would guide the discussion of affordable housing in Southbury moving forward. If one member or all members could be present at whatever date we set that meeting. I want to get it in your mind and get you thinking in that regard. And when the time comes to start looking, you know, a month out, 2 months out, whenever we can get that meeting in, if an effort can be made to possibly attend that meeting, that would be very appreciated, but it's just for your information at this moment.
So we're talking January or February?
Potentially. I frankly have to get in touch with Jeff and the Board of Selectmen to see what their schedules would be. That's the last group to kind of coordinate at this point. And then it's bringing everyone together and seeing what timeline would be necessary to look ahead and set such a meeting.
Do you know, Jordan, if the Board of Selectmen has at least been informed that they are being requested to be at this meeting?
I've spoken with Jeff. I don't know if the board has been notified because we really haven't gotten to that point yet. But now is the time for kind of that discussion to happen, so.
Okay,
That's all I got.
Thanks.
Of course.
Thanks, Jordan.
all right. Anything else you guys want to talk about?
Can't.
Good World Series.
It's a special meeting. Yeah, so
Yeah,
far.
it was last night. wasn't it?
Good World Series.
All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn then?
I move that we adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.